Welcome to this podcast, Holistic Creators, where we share our unique and universal stories about shaping the future for the 4 Ps: people, planet, purpose, and profit. My name is Swanette. I'm a mental coach and your host of this show. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to a holistic future. So welcome. Hello and welcome to my podcast, Holistic Creators. My name is Swanette and I'm your host. Today my guest is Jenetta. Jenetta is the founder of the Epiphany process and World Jenny's Day. Welcome to my show, Jenetta.
Oh, thank you, Swanette, and it's an honor and pleasure. And I can't tell you how many people call me Jenny, and I'm very used to it.
And I think there's a reason why this is happening. Perhaps Jenny is also with us.
This is so true.
So
it's actually my fault, because I had no idea how the similarity between Jenetta and Jennifer would confuse people, but it did and does, but more so since Jenny's died. Interesting.
Yeah. So Jenetta, I'm happy that you are on my show, and yeah, let's hear a little bit about your story. So a little bit of your background, but also what happened that made you the person that you are right now with your mission.
Yes, gosh. Well, I used to be a sales motivational trainer and speaker, and I was pretty good at it. You know, people would get a rah-rah time with me and feel fired up and go off, and the sales would come pouring in. But I realized that it wasn't all about sales, that actually it was more about people. And those people would come back after next to no time saying, we need another fix of Jenetta or another dose. And to me, that sounded like I was their drug. And in a sense I was, because they were getting their fix of energy from me and had no idea how to become inspired and motivated and sustain that from their own energy. And I realized that I was out of integrity. So I took myself off for quite a few years, nearly 7 years, in fact, working on my intuitive abilities, because after all, CEOs of big companies will tell you that their gut feeling is their most accurate. So I was working on expanding that for me so that I could help people more authentically. And around about the time that I started questioning it again, my greatest life test happened. And why I questioned it was that people were starting to come back again and say, your intuition is more accurate than ours, so please tell us what, where, how, and why. And in all my studies and in my opinion and experience, being intuitive isn't a closed society. We all are intuitive, but we just don't know how to expand those skills. So again, I felt like I was robbing them of the ability to do it for themselves and out of integrity again. And as I say, that's when my greatest life test happened to me. And it happened one Monday afternoon. My 16-year-old daughter, Jenny, and I were having a conversation where I was laying safekeeping house rules that she was breaking left, right, and center. And that conversation escalated into a very large argument. And she left in a great rage with not such very nice words, parting words, as she told me she couldn't live like this and she was going to pack and leave home. And after a while, I sensed something wasn't right, and I went to find her. And I found her in her shower, hanging with a broken neck.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for hearing that. And we had this conversation before, so for most of the people, it's of course new to hear this, but I have heard from you that on the one hand, this was kind of impossible that this could happen in this situation. And at the same time, this was part of your path. And I can only say I'm sorry, but I know that this was necessary for a reason as well. So please continue a little bit to let us understand how this all comes together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a reason, but of course at that time it felt like the end of the world. And my whole world came crashing down in that moment of finding her. I lost my marriage. As a family, we splintered into different directions as we each tried to cope with really the PTSD that comes with such a violent end. And my youngest daughter, we were in a country that allowed a 12-year-old to decide which parent they could go and live with, and she chose her dad. So I call that my living death, because basically she and I had very little contact face to face, day to day, over her teenage years, while she lived with her father in another country. So that was another big loss I had to deal with as well. And prophetically 9 months, because it took 9 months to form Jenny, and then 9 months after Jenny had left, I was walking along the street one day, absolutely mindless with grief and overwhelm. I had planned my own suicide because I just couldn't see the reason to move on and live life. There just didn't seem any reason. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I needed to cross the road. So I mindlessly stepped into the road with oncoming traffic, weaved in between the traffic. It was a miracle I didn't get hit, actually. And I think part of me even wanted me to be hit. You know, it didn't matter if I was or wasn't. And I got to the middle of the road when I had an insight that I'd not been able to have or experience after losing Jen. And that was, I stood there going, Jenetta, you've forgotten that you still have choice. You've taken the label of the mother who had an argument with her daughter and she ended her life as the label for the rest of your life. And I still carried on mindlessly. It didn't clear my brain, but I carried on mindlessly weaving myself through the traffic coming the other side, and stepped safely, miraculously, onto the pavement on the other side of the road. And as I stepped there, I realized that I had just had what I now call my crossing over moment, which has so many different meanings attached to it, of course. And that moment, I realized, even though I was still deep in sorrow, still feeling senseless, still feeling meaningless, that there were answers, and that it would take some research and studying. I had tried many modalities and conventional therapy, and although they were helpful, there was always a missing there. It was like it was incomplete. And it was that incompleteness that left me still feeling mindlessly overwhelmed, I suppose the word is. And so it took me a fair time to get that energy to move forward and start researching and studying, and then applying and moving myself and walking the walk and talking the talk of what I knew I had to get through to be able to get to the other side and say, okay, life is livable once again. And that's what I did. And with a result that I have been able to help people in similar situations. I've helped people who've been in terrorist attacks and other PTSD situations, you know, air crashes, helicopter crashes, losing loved ones in not such nice circumstances, helping teenagers who aren't getting out of bed, washing, not eating, self-harming, writing suicide notes. They're now living really fulfilling lives. And so I've been able to help so many because I have walked the walk, and they're going, well, we understand that Jenetta gets us because she's been there. And so that's been the most inspiring part of what I've been through. It's taken, because of that loss, for me to really step out with an open heart and live my life purpose. So if this hadn't happened, so much would be lost. As much as it happening has been lost, there's a long list of loss, and that loss is with me for the rest of my life. So I'm not going around pretending it's okay. It's there for forever. And so I've got that list of loss for forever. I haven't pushed it to one side and pretended it's not there. But I've got an equally as long list that shows where such precious and amazing things have come out because of this loss that would be missing if Jen was still around. And it's a very heart-opening experience when you get to that state.
Wow, this is so amazing. And I can only imagine how this is going through such an incredible transformation. Like on the one hand, having this very deep experience of a loss, and then figuring out, but there's still a meaning inside, that I have to give something to humanity to help them. And what is it that you can do for people, like in the way of helping them? Because what I see at the moment is we have a lot of people that lost loved ones during the pandemic, or even more children tried to commit suicide because they went into depression because of social isolation and these kind of things. So what can you do for people, or how can you help people to do the first step when they are in grief, and how can they do?
It's a very tricky one. I always say there are two types of clients that present themselves to me. And the one is where they're comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, a lot of people say, what do you mean about that? Well, what I mean is, as much as they're surrounded with possible, even deep overwhelm and pain, there's something in that overwhelm and pain that's serving them. So an example would be, perhaps I've lost my mother, and now my community comes forward and nurtures me and looks after me and says, we're here for you, which is brilliant on one level. But if I feel that that's replaced my mother, I don't particularly want to lose that. And if I start telling my community that I've powerfully moved through and got to the other side, and I'm through the numbing overwhelm, I might lose that support and that understanding. Meanwhile, actually what happens is, when you do this process and you move through, you don't lose that support. But for somebody in that grief, they don't understand that. Another example would be, many parents get stuck in this one. As I say, I'm not through having lost Jenny. It's still there. But I am living an inspired life at the same time. And for many parents, that would be a betrayal of their love to their child. How can they possibly live an inspired and insightful life because they've lost their child? Because that means that they didn't love them enough, or don't love them enough. So there are many people who are really not ready for this process, as they get stuck in being comfortable being uncomfortable. So the person and people I help and have helped, and I've helped thousands around the world, are the ones who go, where I was when I crossed that road, I can't take another minute of feeling like this without doing something about it, because it was like a lifetime emotional prison sentence. And I wasn't prepared to live that until my 80s or 90s, living in abject misery. It just didn't feel like an option or the reason why I was on this earth. There really did feel like a bigger reason. So when people come to me and say, I can't take another minute of this, I have to do something, then they're uncomfortable being uncomfortable. And then they're ready to be my client. And so very often when we meet up for the first time, they're sussing out the process as I explain it, and me to see if they relate to me, because they might not. And I'm sussing out whether they're ready for the process, so we're not wasting their time, my time, and their money. And that, to me, is where one can work from great authenticity. And that's how I advise people to move forward.
If someone feels like, okay, I have this kind of loss and I really want to change my life because I can't continue like that, and still at the same time, of course, I love the person I lost. How is this process looking like? So what is the journey you're taking them on?
Well, the journey is really difficult to describe until you start taking it. It's rather like me saying, somebody saying to me, okay, I'm going to be a javelin thrower and I'm going to become an Olympic javelin thrower. Well, you can go to a field and pick up the javelin and throw it and say, okay, I'm a javelin thrower now, but you're not. You've just thrown a javelin. And until you get into it and get coached and shown the way of how to get through it, you can theorize from here till next year about how to throw a javelin. But I call this mental and emotional and even spiritual gym, where you come in and you learn skills and techniques that are very different to what you're used to asking yourself. They're very specialized, and depending on where the person's sense of loss and hang-ups are, that also plays an influence on how they ask those questions to themselves. So they learn these questions through me and through coaching. And then they're able to go off without me and carry on. It really is about people saying, okay, I can't do this anymore. I've got to find new skills. I don't know what those skills are, but I'll do what it takes. I identify with what Jenetta's saying. I identify with Jenetta, and now I must do my part, which is show up and work the work and also walk the walk and talk the talk. And that's when both of us are ready to take that journey together.
So, and how does it look like? You call it the Epiphany process. So there must be this moment of realization, or getting some insights that really change life. How does this moment look like?
It's amazing. In fact, I call the process the yin and yang of science, because although it's very scientific, it really does embrace the positive and negative of everything. Everything has the positive and a negative side, and how to embrace and bring both into open-hearted manageability, because we tend to polarize ourselves to either see things extremely positively or extremely negatively. And when you only see part of the perception, you're not seeing the whole picture. So without getting too technical, the moment you know how to bring the opposing thoughts and feelings that are pulling away from each other into center, you create what we call in science a photon in your consciousness. And photon in Greek, that's phos in Greek, means light. So what happens is, with these particular sets of questions that bring the extreme polarized negative thoughts and feelings that we often have, an example would be, during the day, I've got a very big challenge and I logicalize it in my thought process, my male logic. Okay, I'm going to take this action and do this and do that and do the other, right. I've got a plan of action for this overwhelming challenge. And then you go to bed that night and it's 3 o'clock in the morning You go, oh, and your emotions go, I don't agree with that. It's too frightening. So what this process does is it brings these extreme thoughts and feelings that often oppose each other into a place of centered manageability. And as that happens, it creates a photon in our conscious consciousness and our unconscious consciousness. And when that photon happens, and that's why we call it the epiphany moment, when that happens, you lighten up about that particular charge you had about something or someone. So we work on a specific charge that lightens up. It happens in a nanosecond. If we're doing it without video, I can feel the person lightening up. But often you hear them going, oh, I never thought about it that way, ever. And I feel so different in an instant. I feel so different about the person or the circumstance. And I'm in a place of open-hearted acceptance and appreciation and grace and like spontaneous love about it. It's no longer bothering me. And when that happens, it allows the next thing that's bothering you the most to safely surface from your unconscious consciousness. Now you've got the skills and the techniques to bring the next thing that's bothering you the most into centered, open-hearted appreciation and spontaneous love and grace again. And you create another photon, another epiphany moment. And bringing ourselves with our charges into that centered, open-hearted understanding is a never-ending story. In fact, in the scientific diagram I draw for my clients, that whole diagram is topped by the infinity sign, because we're always bringing ourselves into enlightenment. We're lightening up all the time when we're using this process. And it's very liberating and empowering, accurate, and you can do it for yourself. So I'm not the guru that has to be spent the rest of your life with, following me around. In fact, I get teased. People say to me, you know, the problem with you, Jenetta, is you lose clients all the time. And it's like, yes, it is such a brilliant problem, because it means people can get on and do it for themselves.
Yeah, so it's about their own empowerment. You are leading them part of their way. And as you said, it's like layer for layer or step by step, bringing them deeper into their own understanding. But then when they are empowered, they're ready to go. And yeah, I think that, of course, also this kind of ripple effect can happen, that someone who's empowered can help others, again, empower them. So if they would be inside of, like, I'm still the victim, I'm not becoming my own self-leader, then they were dependent on you all the time. But
yes,
as you said, yeah, you're losing clients, but you're empowering people to, no? I think there are so many people that need you. So,
and in actual fact, in all fairness, that's not entirely true, because the ones that really grasp this with two pairs of hands, arms, teeth, feet, and everything else, they come back and I have 2 certification programs. So the first one helps them to really master the process to a fine tune. Others will go off and say, look, what I've got will do for me, and I'm happy to do that. And they go off and often they forget to apply it, because it's like javelin throwing. If you don't carry on practicing and perfecting, the skill gets weakened. But for those who really have seen how it's changed their lives, they come back for these programs and do the self-mastery, and some of them even get invited to become consultants as well. And so, I mean, they do come back. And I have one client, and she really doesn't mind me talking about her. She's got 3 autistic children who, when she first came to me, were all under the age of 11, 3 autistic boys. And so she comes back every now and then for top-ups, going, okay, this is a particularly difficult time with all three. Can you just help me with the questions? Because you can get a bit bogged down when so much is happening at once. So by way of example, I do have clients come back and say, okay, we just need a top up, just a little bit of guidance, like going to gym and having a personal trainer, just perfect your technique at gym. It's the same with this.
Yeah, so this is super amazing. And I would like to go back to the point where you spoke about your own intuition. And with that comes a question like, you said, okay, you could feel that something was not okay with Jenny, like she said she wanted to leave with her luggage, but there was something inside of your body that told you, take a look. And I can imagine that other parents as well have this kind of feeling, something is not okay with my child. How can they like connect in this moment in a better way so that perhaps suicide or children leaving or something like that wouldn't happen? Do you have any ideas about that?
Oh, I so do. And it's such a powerful question to ask. And I'm so glad you've asked it. One of the things in hindsight that I realized I was missing was the ability to become clear and focused and certain about what I was hearing and what I was responding to and what I was contributing to. Because so much of my response to a child in trouble like that came from a wounded me, because I hadn't got the tools to deal with what happened previous to having children. So a lot of my reactions to a child like that came from knee-jerk reactions on how I coped with difficulties before that. And it became the way to cope. And often it caused more havoc than helped. And now I'm able to help parents to speak very clearly and with certainty and specificity. Their communication abilities are profound as they are able to step back from the drama that's playing out between them and their child, look at the bigger picture, and from an open heart respond from their wisdom instead of from the distraction of their knee-jerk thoughts and emotions, which is where most of us respond to before we know any better. You know, it's like, you call me a name, I'll call you a name. How dare you talk to me that? That's really, you know, you can hear it as a parent. Heard my parents do it. And when you've got a child in difficulty, one's knee-jerk responses don't work as well as when you have the skills and tools to be able to very succinctly and powerfully and accurately respond and listen. The way you listen makes a huge, huge difference. And that enables that response to come from your wise side, which normally gets blocked, blinded, and distorted by feeling overly emotional or feeling overly analytical, or a seesaw between the two. And the moment these parents I've helped speak from that wise place without those distractions, amazing things start happening. Responses change. Authentic conversations can be safely spoken from because they're coming from a place of love instead of fear and judgment.
Yeah, I think active listening is the first part. As we like already when we are listening to someone have our own concepts, perhaps are judging or have ideas what the other person is going to tell, and we are not there, not present and listening actively. And then, of course, because of our own experiences, like we have this, I would say, instant reaction on certain kind of triggers, like, no, if you tell me something, it's like, whoa, and I go up like a rocket. And so I think this is super important to get clarity on yourself. Like, what is it that you have as your own filters? What are like normal reactions? And have a pause in between before you react and consider, have a choice. How can I react in a different way? And you will see the other person will react also in a different way.
That's very true. And yet, even then, there's judgment in what we're saying there, that we're not good enough as a parent, as a human being, as a mother, as a daughter, son, father, brother, sister, whatever. There's still judgment in that. And what I love about this process is that all judgment really authentically and spontaneously, when you apply these techniques, actually it peels away, so that you don't have to take a breath and go, wait, that was wrong. Now what's right to say? What's the right thing to say? Because when you have that judgment, you're still going to have charge attached to it. Whereas when you come from open-hearted spontaneity, and the judgment is being managed from that open heart, then equally as spontaneously and authentically, the appropriate words come out your mouth. And I mean, the number of times I've stopped and gone, oh my word, where did those wise words come from? I didn't have to stop and say, okay, take a breath and think about it and respond this way and see if it works. It doesn't work like that. Once you're really in your true genius, without the distraction of that fear and that judgment, you can access your wisdom. And that's when, I mean, I get phone calls from clients going, by way of example, I've just had a conversation with my great uncle Johnny, and I hate the man. And if I've said 2 words to him in all my lifetime, it's a lot. And I've just had a half an hour conversation with him where I was able to speak my truth from my heart, and he responded differently to how he would have before. And he listened to me differently, and I listened, and I responded differently. And I didn't have to stop. I mean, this is what clients say to me. I'm giving you a client's example. I didn't have to stop and say, take a breath, and now how am I going to respond to that? Or put down the phone and say, I'll write to him, or I'll respond later. It all came out in that moment from a place of great wisdom. And that's what this process enables you to do.
Yeah, wow, this is absolute stunning. And I think so many people now listening can feel like, oh, if this would be possible for me, even in normal situations, like then it's not even a need that something really tragical needs to happen to me, but this is like a part of being that is so helpful for our society and so necessary right now. And yeah.
I so agree with you. I really believe that when we can change our perceptions, see, so much comes from how we judge ourselves or how we pride ourselves. So we pride ourselves that we're not something else, which is judgment again, extreme judgment. You know, I don't do that because I'm this type of person. And the moment we can take that pride and that that judgment of failure, when we can take those extremes and rather see the whole picture, not one side, and we change how we perceive about ourselves. Because when I take on a new client, they think it's about getting their errant husband right, or their unbelievably unreasonable wife right, or whoever it is, boss, whoever, or the situation needs to change for them to feel okay about life. The moment they push that perception away and start working on themselves and the judgments that bring them down and make them feel incomplete, when that becomes open-hearted about themselves, that's when their response changes to situations and people, and then people respond differently to them.
Yeah, I can only agree. So I think this is like kind of a mobile, like these parts are hanging on how you react, and everybody else will adapt to your behavior. And I can only imagine how this would look like if we could create a society where everybody is speaking from an open heart without judgment and really deeply listening to each other, and yeah, really get an understanding of the other person who we are communicating with. This would be amazing.
It would be, and you've hit it on the head. And another example I can give you, which I use a lot when I'm starting with a new client, is we've got this whole thing about bullying and victims and perpetrators, bullies and victims. And so many schools and wherever around the world believe that the only way to sort that out is by removing the victim from the bully and then taking the bully and teaching them how to be kind and gentle and thoughtful and loving. And so there's this perception that the victim is the nice person and the bully is the horrible person. Meanwhile, when you really look at the bigger picture, each of us have, you know, there are nearly 5,000 human traits in the dictionary, and approximately half are negative and half are positive. And yet we've been told that we're only meant to be positive. So any negative traits that are human have to be eliminated, means we are judging half of who we are. So anything that we perceive we're not, we're going to attract people and circumstances into our life that reflect the stuff that we denied we are. And I mean, that's the reflection stuff and the law of attraction that so many people talk about. But how do you handle attracting the very people portraying, or the very circumstances portraying the traits that you despise in yourself? And what this process enables you to understand is that you're attracting anybody that comes into your sphere of influence will be your inadvertent teacher, because they're showing that part of yourself that you judge so severely. So for the bully, he's attracting the victim to see that part of himself that he believes is weak. And when he learns how to see its strengths, and when the victim learns, because she sees the bully as the one that portrays a whole load of traits that she despises and goes or fears and despises, and or he fears and despises. And so when they attract whatever they believe has to be avoided, and then can see where the equal value, because it doesn't mean that the perpetrator shouldn't be addressed. They should be. But when you've got both sides seeing the other side and the value and the disservice on both sides, then new conversations start happening between that victim and perpetrator. And I've worked with it lots and lots and lots, especially in marriages. And so if you take the victim away and remove the perpetrator, all that will happen is the victim will continue to attract the same thing happening again and again till they understand and embrace the bigger picture of what's happening and love all parts of themselves and others. And then they can address the perpetrator, the bully, and say, what you said to me was inappropriate. And in fact, their energy changes. So they're no longer attractive to be victimized. When their energy changes, that magnetism just drops instantly. So I've seen victims and watched victims step into their space and they no longer get bullied anymore. So it's not about removing the bully, it's about helping the two to change their conversations and perceptions about themselves, and then their perception and conversation changes between the two of them, and they're no longer attracted to be bullies and victims.
Yeah, and I can only agree on that, as I had this situation being a victim as a child. So I was bullied a lot, and really like situation where children hold me and painted something on my forehead, which I couldn't clean up, and I felt like I had a near-death experience when I was 8 years old. And so there were certain situations where I always had this feeling, I don't belong here. This is not my planet, and I don't belong to this society. And there were so many situations where I felt like, okay, people don't like me, and I'm really getting all this overwhelmed with other children bullying me. And then my father decided that it is important to start boxing training. And I trained with him, but as you said, my energy changed. And this meant like, there was no need that I had any kind of children, but it was like, now I could do that. And it stopped. Like I got really kind of strong in myself, and even I would say kind of a rebel, but it was like, okay, this is the other side of the energy. Like I'm now empowered, I'm now strong, and I know how it feels being a victim, and I now feel how the other energy is, and I can use this and standing for my opinion, standing for my point. And there's no, it doesn't happen anymore. People are not bullying me anymore since years and years, of course. So, yeah.
And that's so true. And there are many forms to be able to balance that out. And what an amazing man your dad was for being able to see that you were missing a physical tool and skill. That is just brilliant. What a story.
Yeah, and yeah, I see as well that at the moment, and I'm really changing a little bit our conversation, a lot of children or young people are in a state of mental health problems, so to say, that they are in depression or feel that they don't belong to this society. And I would say this, we are in a situation where this world is really crazy. So a feeling that you can adapt to that is kind of even strange. But feeling that they don't belong here, and perhaps even also trying to commit suicide. What do you think about this perspective about mental health and how we can cope with a society or a situation that is really, really chaotic?
Yeah, again, it's because everybody believes that a person feeling like that is broken. That's what I've observed. And there's nothing broken in feeling like that. It's very human. And whilst society goes around saying, oh, if a person is feeling so compromised and suicidal, they have to be fixed. And then that makes the person feel worse and possibly can push them down the rabbit hole even further, because then they feel they're not normal, and everybody else has got their stuff together, and they're clearly different. And whilst that type of conversation and reaction is administered to people who are feeling compromised, because as I mentioned, I nearly ended my life 3 times after Jenny died, and I was not a suicidal type of person. And I realized how dangerous it was for me to even start talking depression and suicide, because people's energy around me changed, and I suddenly wasn't able to be reasoned with in their perception. So I lost the ability to reason with them because they thought I was being unable to be reasoned with, unreasonable. And so that made me feel worse. So fortunately, I didn't buy into their truth. And I knew after that, having to walk the walk the way I did, that after that it was helping the world to change conversations around people feeling compromised, that there's nothing wrong with feeling that. It's very human and it's part of life, and that once you've got the skills to deal with it, that's all that matters, because life is livable, when you know how to handle it. And feeling depressed and compromised doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's human. And when everybody goes into that place of understanding and empathy, new conversations start. I've watched it again and again. That's why we have World Jenny's Day, by the way, which is something else I'd love to share with everybody today. Sometime after Jenny died, we realized that she'd actually died on World Mental Health Day, the 10th of October. And so we started what's known as World Jenny's Day, where we use the performing arts and the arts to change conversations around depression and suicide, to normalize them, to soften them. Because after all, we are creatures of creation. And however you see our creator, it's very apparent by the very way we operate as human beings that something bigger than us helps us to operate and stay human and have a heart beating and some sort of power, whatever we want to call it. But that is some sort of creator has created the creation, and we're creatures of that creativity and that creation. And when we step into our creative abilities, we're most aligned with that power and that insight. So we use the performing arts and arts creativity skills, and people perform on that day all around the world to lighten and the feelings, lift spirits for people as they realize that life is livable when you're working from your genius, from your creativity, and when you're listening to others doing the same. And that it's amazing what with the solutions that the Epiphany process can bring to so many who are feeling compromised, and they step back into their power. So what with that and using creative skills, World Jenny's Day becomes a very powerful day where we're not sitting around pontificating how there's a problem with people and the younger generation and what are we going to do to help them fix it. We're talking about and celebrating mental health wellness. And I'm very passionate about that.
And this is super powerful, because it's mental health wellness and not fixing people, but getting an understanding and creating something where certain kinds of tools for this special day. So before we continue speaking about Jenny's Day, I would like to do a step back. And you said Jenny died on this mental health day. Do you think that there is something like a path that is given from creator so that this happens at a certain kind of day, or that situations show up that couldn't happen normally? As you said, she was hung in the shower. And do you think that there is something like a written path for us?
I always wondered until I lost Jenny, and I think this is such a powerful question. I can't definitely go, yes, this is definitely how it works and operates. But my research and working with so many people who have also lost loved ones in tragic ways, including suicide, my research has shown time and time again that it would appear that we have quite a few outlets in our lives that we get to, that near miss in a car accident where you go, how did that car miss me? Or whatever. where we get to, or if we read also the many accounts worldwide of near-death experiences where people do pass over and then come back. In my research, it's shown that we have at least 4 exit points in our lifetime that we either as souls or are designated. Can't say for sure which it is, but it does kind of feel like we have a choice in it. And we get to those points of exit and go, is it time or isn't it time? And many near-death experiences will talk about them saying they get there and they go, okay, it's not time yet. It's not time. I'm coming back. Some go over and some get to that point of going to go over and they decide before they go over. And definitely, I mean, I shared with you, Swanette, the other day about the fact that Jenny should not have succeeded that day. So obviously, initially, my shock was to try and bring her back to life as a mother, as another human being. All I wanted was my child to be alive. But in the months that followed, as I worked out the logistics of her leaving that day, there were 3 major factors that should not have enabled her to succeed in killing herself. They're major ones. And all of them, in fact, it's four major ones. All of them worked together for her to leave as painlessly as possible. And she couldn't have planned it. They were bigger factors than Jenny's planning to leave the planet. And, you know, by way of example, I'll give you one. She broke her neck, and that's an exact science. Hangmen in years gone by, when hanging was a law, they had to go and study how to break a neck. It doesn't happen easily, and she broke her neck. And there were many other factors in that shower that day that shouldn't actually have worked, and they did. And when I realized that, I realized, oh my word, that there has to be a bigger picture than just the preservation of life that we don't get until we see that bigger picture. So it's a very meaningful question you've asked there. There's far more to all of this. I mean, another example is 10th of October is the day she left this planet. But sometime afterwards, in fact, 7 days short of 9 months, I had a vision of her as I came to from being asleep. And she was 7 at the time. And suddenly I got a sense of following the number 7, and then 9 came through. And fortunately for me, because I'd been working so much on my intuition, it was perhaps a little bit easier for me to be guided with that. But what worked out in the end was that we realized that Jenny's birth year and death year, birth date and death date all added up to 7s and 9s. And nobody else in the family and nobody else I've met has that synchronicity with their birth, and not all of them have died, of course, but I've done it so many times with different people, and it just doesn't work out that way. With the result that some incredibly meaningful things start happening around us when 7 and 9 start showing up. I mean, she was 16 when she died, and in numerology, you bring everything down to one number. So 16 is 1 plus 6. There's the 7. And interestingly enough, this year, it's a 2023 year, which of course adds up to 7. So it's a 7 year this year as we go into this year's World Jenny's Day. And 10th of the 10th, 2023, so that's 7 for 2023, and 10 and 10 is 2, and 2 plus 7 is 9. And that's what happened in that very year she died, in 2005. She died on 10/10/2005. There's the 7 again, and the 10 and the 10 is the 2. And she was born on 25th of September. So 2 and 5 is 7, and September is 9. And she was born in 1989, which if you add up all into one figure is 9. So 9 plus 9 plus 7 all adds up to 7 again. And it's the same has happened again this year. It blows my mind. And it's 18 years since she died, which adds up to 9. And she'd be turning 34 this year, which adds up to 7. This happens every 3 to 4 years with Jenny and her birth and death dates and World Jenny's Day. And every time it happens, I just sit there going, this is mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. So yes, I believe there's much bigger picture than the loss of a loved one. And when you can start seeing it and embracing it, life just becomes so much more meaningful because we're so scared of death. That's half the problem. We've been taught we were born and we live and we avoid death until we really, really, really have to face it, instead of saying it's part of life and it's just as joyous as it is trying. Being born is just as joyous as it is trying for both mother and child and the family sitting around. It's a very stressful time and a very joyous time. Going through life is very stressful and joyous. It has its stressful times and its joyous times, and death is the same. And when we can embrace it as part of the cycle of life instead of trying to avoid it and fear it, then these messages in death become very profound.
And for myself, I've been there. I've been very close to heaven. And it was like so peaceful and calm and loving that I really wanted to go there. And I was kind of pushed back into my body being in coma. And so I feel that, yeah, we have this concept of, okay, we are dying, but we are just leaving our body, becoming the soul again. And then we will come back, or even we can still connect with our loved ones. If you're super highly intuitive, you can feel the energy of people being around. And for me, for example, I'm living in beautiful Madeira Island, and this is an island of flowers. And sometimes if I pass by a certain kind of flower, it's like I feel this whispering of my mother who died some years ago, and she loved flowers. She would have loved this island. And it's like, okay, there's this moment of connection, like a short remembering her and like getting a message. And so it feels like, no, she is not dead. She is kind of, the spirit is still here and is connecting with me. So do you have these moments as well now?
Oh, I do. And I so relate. First of all, I relate what you're saying about your near-death experience. What an experience to experience and to come back and face what that message gave you. I mean, I can only give you a huge shout out. So I wanted to say that because people who've not experienced that have no idea what that brings with it. So, you know, I really honor and respect you for that. And then in terms of what you were saying with people having passed, the very first thing, you know, we released Jenny's ashes over the reef south of Mombasa Island in Kenya, my son Neil and I. And I stood at that reef edge saying, science, not religion or airy-fairy woo-woo spirituality. Science says energy cannot be created or destroyed. The moment it finishes in one form, it reforms into a new version of itself. Now, my daughter was energy, so where's the new version? It can't just disappear. And I remember saying something meaningful will come out of this. And that's when I started fine-tuning to start. I didn't know it was going to be a book, but I started taking notes and eventually published Full Circle Rainbow, which is all about the sometimes quite blatant, and others quite subtle happenings around me that showed me where Jenny's energy was and still is. We're still having conversations on subtle levels that blow me away. And 7 and 9 is one form of communication from her.
Yeah, and she left a legacy that is Jenny's Day. And I think this is something that, yeah, you now live for humanity and for all the people that need this kind of help. And I would go a little bit deeper into that. For whom is this day the right day to join?
Anybody who relates to it. Anybody that goes, I love this day, I want to be a part of it. This is exactly what I've been questioning. This is exactly the missing. I mean, last year we did it over 16 hours through USA Global TV, and it was phenomenal. The year before we did it through the app, the audio app Clubhouse, over 24 hours. We started at 10 a.m. on the 10th of the 10th in New Zealand and moved over hour by hour on the next time zone at 10 a.m. and the next at 10 until we came right back to New Zealand 24 hours later. And people could feel the upliftment of spirit, that people's spirits were being uplifted. And that was during lockdown, where they were going, this is what mental health is about. When people are singing and acting, last year people were able to dance as well, do comedy. We had such a brilliant cross-section. By way of example, we had children in the slums here in Kenya doing dance that was just amazing in a tin shack. And then we went over to, in the last hours, over to LA, where street artists were drawing in the streets of LA World Jenny's Day, all over post boxes and in designated street art areas of the streets of LA. And then we went over to Tokyo, where the top Michael Jackson impersonator was dancing for us. And people were going, this is a phenomenal day to celebrate through performing arts and the arts. We had artists. It was an amazing, amazing day. So this year we're doing the same, starting in New Zealand and going around for 24 hours and then going over to UK, and we're having an actual gala evening in London. And we'll have celebrities there, and we're doing more variety acts on stage in London, and closing at 10 p.m. London time. Next year, we're looking at New York, the following year, Tokyo, and so on, to celebrate mental health wellness. So if that relates to you, then this is the day for you.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people now feel, okay, they want to know how they can sign up, how they can contribute, perhaps even where they can buy your book and to connect with you. So how can they do that?
Yeah, well, we've got a website called World Jenny's Day, WORLDJENNYSDAY.com, which has a lot of that on there. This week we're adding some more. In fact, after this interview, I'm with my webmaster, so we're adding some more happenings. But you can get hold of me there. You can get hold of me at Jenetta, JENETTA, at theepiphanyprocess.com, THEEPIPHANY process.com. So you can get hold of me, but there's a lot of information, because one of the things that is happening is that more and more things are happening during the course of the year. Like we've got a bike ride through Africa. We've got one of our ambassadors, well, Jenny's Day ambassadors, who's a British gold Paralympian. She's cycling up Kilimanjaro for World Jenny's Day. Anybody who'd like to do a bike ride through 2 game parks with some very skilled guides, it's the 2nd year we're doing it. Talk to me as well, but it's all on that website. We've got so much going on long before World Jenny's Day actually hits. So do contact us either through the website or through me. You're very welcome. And in fact, you can even get me on WhatsApp at +44 777 423 0464. And I'm there personally for you and with you.
So I will put all the links and your number in the show notes, that it is easy for people to reach out to you. And I'm sure your phone will ring endlessly now. Thank you so much.
It will be my pleasure.
So is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask you?
You know, I think we've done quite an extensive share here, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity, because as you and I were saying, if this can make a difference to one person somewhere in the world, then it's a job well done. And just a shout out to you for what you're doing and creating here. And I really thank you and honor you.
Yeah, thank you so much also for these kind words. And I hope to speak to you soon again. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening or watching my podcast, Holistic Creators. If you want to know more about how I can help and support you, have a look at my website, spiritualchangemaker.com. You can also join my Facebook group, Spiritual Changemakers Community. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you also can check the previous episodes.